Oh, did you guys see that?
League of Legends has a damage issue, and I promise you this will be the most interesting video you watch on League this week. It's going to bring up issues not really talked about, and in the background of the talking points, I'm going to have 2016 Rocks Tigers versus SKT1, one of the best series of all time playing, just so you compare damage levels then to now. Here's the things we're going to be talking about, so let's get straight into it. A wise man once said, playing League nowadays, I say, oh, that killed me way more than before, and that's a general feel a lot of League of Legends players are experiencing. The Riot devs themselves admitted to the issue with the durability patch, but just a few months ago also admitted damage levels are basically back to pre-durability patch, and we can feel that in the game. We're not stupid as a player base. I think any time someone mentions being killed faster than feels fair, it's met by, oh, you stood 2 pixels too close, you deserve to be one shot, oh, I didn't play perfectly, skill issue, and it ignores the damage creep that's in the game. Like this comment on, if Garen is on your backline you're trolling. Well, here's Garen on a pro game, on the Azir killing him, that should never happen with all Azir's tools. Or here's him on an ADC in pro play, that should never happen in my Emerald solo queue games apparently, let alone pro play. So just keep in mind for the video, it's a lot easier to say, imagine getting hit by Poppy as an ADC, than in reality what actually happens in the game. If it's happening in pro, it's happening in your silver promos, isn't it? Let's talk about items first and save champion identity for last, as I think that's a great way to end. Item power creep and front-loaded damage. So first up, item damage. Item damage is unquestionably up, and for many champs damage is the best build. It's a double whammy, as not only do items do more damage in the first place, but champs are incentivized to pick full damage items, just multiplying the creep. Renekton is a great example, right? He's a bruiser, so he'll have a little bit of AD, a little bit of resistances, a little bit of HP, and a little bit of cooldown is what he's looking for in his items. What's his first item? Eclipse, which is raw AD, no HP, no cooldown, no resistances, instead of a typical bruiser item. This leads to burstier games, as instead of prolonged fight, tanking damage and sustain through his items, Renekton is squishy and full damage, and his entire game plan is, can I flash stun one shot the carry or not? That's kind of the pattern of League. It feels more like a Call of Duty team deathmatch than a MOBA. Every champ has such a varied kit, and it's such a shame that they all kind of get boiled down to, how can I get so much damage that I can get my full combo off and kill them before they can get their full combo off and kill me? Like, it's crazy. Why has item damage gone up? Why is Renekton suddenly building just raw AD, nothing else? Well, item damage does seem to creep up naturally, but a big turning point is the ability haste rework / nerf. Abilities were very spammy, and they wanted to nerf cooldown, so they changed it into haste, so cooldowns were longer. But they didn't want items to feel weak, so when they nerfed cooldown stats for haste stats, items got compensated with added damage. A good example of an item with this balancing philosophy is Maw. It lost 20 ability haste, but the power is redirected into 10 extra attack damage. Now imagine that across every item in the game. That's not even a damage creep, that's a leap. This is a problem in general, especially with hybrid damage resistant items. Death Stance, for example, in 13.7 it lost 5 armor. In 14.1 it lost another 5 armor. And then it's weak and no one buys it because it's not giving enough armor. So what do? Well, they buff it, of course. But how do they buff it? Instead of adding the armor back, they add 5 more damage. It also used to heal for 170% bonus AD. It now heals for 70% AD. That's less than half the healing. So even items built to beef you up and make you last longer in a team fight now do more damage, while also giving less stats to deal with damage. So just purely on this one item, say Camille versus Renekton matchup, they both built Death Stance. They're both doing more damage, having less armor, so they're both just killing each other faster. That naturally makes the game burstier. More we've seen give 50 MR, now gives 40 MR. Shield Bow used to give an 800 shield, now gives a 500 shield, and 0 lifesteal compared to 10% lifesteal. So we haven't even got into the point that items are doing more damage yet. It's the fact that defensives are just so much weaker. An 800 shield versus a 500 shield is night and day. Losing 10 armor, 10 MR is massive. It's just, it makes the game burstier. Black Cleaver old versus current, exact same HP, less CDR, as it's now 20% haste, not 20% CDR, but 55 AD instead of 40 AD, and an extra 6% armor shred. Every item just has an extra chunk of AD on top now. It's crazy. There's no incentive to build these hybrid defensive options anymore, as they've lost their resistances, they've lost their sustain, while everything in the game does more damage. They're just weaker items than building pure damage like Eclipse. If Death Dance had 10 armor back, all of a sudden Eclipse is a weaker item. And maybe that shifts the building meta into more defensive items, which even with the current state of League, it would reduce the damage in the game. It feels like whenever a class in League of Legends has a problem, damage is the solution. Look at how they made mages more satisfying to play. Shadow Flame plus 20 AP and crit damage. Rabadon's plus 20 AP, Lichbane 75 AP to 100 AP. There's a trend. Problem with the class, add more damage. It's literally what they've just done with ADC. ADC was a load of annoying issues. What do? Add more damage. That's two classes getting a major damage buff in just one season, in literally the same season, and we wonder where the damage creep comes from. This ability haste change though was so close to greatness. Reducing the ability spam in the game was such a good move, but then buffing damage just reverted the nerf and made the game worse. Let me explain. Let's say Lux hits her E, just her E, and pre-ability haste, this did 15% of your HP as damage. And in 7 seconds she's got E back again, so she throws it again, hits you again, that's another 15%. But you get 2 opportunities to dodge it, so there's an interactive lane of dodging skill shots. And if she hits 2 abilities, that's 30% damage. But it's a little bit spammy, so we nerf the ability cooldown overall. So now it's the same interactions, but the E's on a 12-second cooldown, not 7-second cooldown. I actually really like that lane phase. It's a skill expression where you have to keep hitting skill shots, and you've also got the opportunity to dodge skill shots, so it really is all about the skill. But instead of leaving it there and buffing damage means instead of being hit for 15%, you're hit less often, but for 25%. And what does that mean? Well, it's a massive difference, as this means take 1E versus Lux now, especially as a bot laner, and you're in kill range for her combo, because her entire combo does more damage than previously. This makes every ability super punishing. If Lux misses, it's super punishing cooldown wise for her, and if it hits, it's giga punishing for the health bar of the hit champ. There's no chipping away, thinking about mana, all that stuff. It's just level 6. If Lux hits a Q, you're dead. It removes a lot of interactivity in minigames in the lane, and in team fights, if you do this to the 10 champs, it's literally just who can land a single spell first, and then that person is one shot. There's just so much less outplay because of the way damage has gotten, and I would actually argue Cassante and Yi are great evidence of this, of just how bursty the gameplay has gotten. They're so problematic to balance because both of them have one thing in common. They both have a W that can massively reduce damage in a short period of time, and because the game is so bursty, when timed right, they can negate all the one-shot abilities, and then no one's got anything for the next 5 seconds and they're waiting to one-shot them again. It's just such a terrible gameplay cycle. Items also have so much front-loaded damage, it turns like bruisers and tanks into bursty champs.
Oh, did you guys see that?
We've all been hit by a Mundo who's got Heartsteel, or someone with a Sunderer's Sky proc. Sunderer's Sky does 120% extra damage, there's the burst. Heartsteel does a silly amount of upfront damage from one auto. A tank can do like half an ADC's health bar with an auto. And before you say, imagine getting hit by a Mundo as an ADC, go back to the start, watch Garen on top of an ADC in pro play. It happens. A Sion, a Mundo, a Jarvan, etc. all get one auto off and they do an absurd amount of their damage, and it's all done through items. I feel like if they did the exact same damage they do normally, but over 5 seconds, it would be a way more balanced and healthy game. Let's say the damage looks like this per second. 300 damage, 300 damage, 300 damage, 300 damage, 300 damage. That's so much better than the way the current items work, where it looks more like this. 800 damage in 1 second, then 175, 175, 175, 175. It's the exact same damage over 5 seconds. Getting on top of someone to auto them once just adds so much burst into the game. Rather than 5 seconds, give champs the opportunity to kite, be peeled, dodge, more counterplay, and it's just a healthier game. Currently you don't even have a chance to really peel, as one auto and they've done their job. They've done 70% of the damage they're going to do. Again, back to Lux, and let's use the example of, say she's hitting a single E. What else does she hit you with? Off one ability. If Lux lands an E of 3 items, she hits you with Luden's proc, Storm Surge proc, Shadow Flame crit, Arcane Comet, Scorch, and if you add one auto attack, Cheap Shot does true damage. One ability can hit you with 6 different damage sources. I'm not saying Lux shouldn't do burst. That's absolutely what Lux's identity is. It's what she does in the game. It's just, why can't we have Lux burst from one ability and 1 or 2 damage modifiers? It just seems so unnecessary and unsatisfying to be hit by one thing and then 6 other things hit me. I often look at the death screen and random items have done more damage to me than the ability itself. And that's just really bad for League of Legends, I think. The biggest problem for me is every role a carry champ is played and rewarded for building pure damage. And this is root cause for many problems for me, as if every role is picking damage, it kind of blurs the lines of what each role identity is, what everyone's trying to do in the game, and there's obviously just going to be a damage creep in the game. I'm about to actually blow your mind here. Let's look at Jungle Champs by pick rate, and most of these are damage, but a lot of these champs just try and think about like how much burst they can do. So here's junglers by pick rate. We've got damage, 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 damage. Broken new champ doesn't count. Damage, 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 damage. Okay, and then we get to the tanks, right? But then let's say we click on a Moo. So we've got our first tank. Click on him. What does he build? He builds a tank item with a passive damage effect. And then he built a fucking AP mage item because damage is just so broken in this game. He can build an AP mage item, and that's what he builds. It's crazy. Even if we go back to pick rates and have a look at Graves, he's often had crit builds in the past. He's just full lethality. It's how much damage can I get off instantly. We can look at Vi, for example, who can be a bit of a bruiser at times. I played her a lot last season, and her best build was going Eclipse Essence Reaver Collector, just pure one-shot damage. And it was like 3% higher than her bruiser build. Just everyone, it's not just that they're picking a damage champ, it's that they are literally solely maximum damage is the best build. Let's have a look at top laners. Damage, damage. Ward's a tricky one. Damage, 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 damage. One-shot tank damage, 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 troll champ damage, and then we get into like slightly tankier champs. And here you say Aatrox is more of a drain tank bruiser. Not anymore, he's not. That's what he was. He now builds lethality, and that's his best build. He either hits his Qs and one-shots, or he misses his Qs and gets one-shot. Gragas, you're like, okay, he's a bit of a tanky cooldown bruiser. No, his best build is literally going full AP burst, try and one-shot the carry. Even someone like Dr. Mundo, his first item, Heartsteel, which has the massive, obviously, damage proc at the start. He'll then build Sunfire Aegis, which what does it do? Does damage. And then they've added this stupid item into the game for some reason, which gives 40 attack damage and 2% of your bonus health as attack damage. Just like, who's that for? Like, literally, all that comes to mind are Sion and Mundo. And it's like, why are we giving Sion and Mundo damage items? Well, they can have like 8k HP. I just don't get it. They're tanks. Why is just damage getting added to the game? So like we've just looked at there, not only are all the champs being picked damage dealers, but even like the bruisers or people who will typically sacrifice a bit of damage for survivability, which makes team fights longer, the game's less bursty in general, are just building full lethality, full damage. Let's imagine what an average solo queue game looks like right now, using the top 3 most picked champs in each role. So we can pick lethality Aatrox, Kha'Zix, Akali, Lucian, Nami. And that's like the most common team comp at the minute. Even without all the damage creep, by nature of the champs picked, the game's just so bursty. There's no one there to soak up damage. Imagine if that team was to like fight each other, the Kha'Zix and Akali 2v2. That is literally just who can hit a couple of abilities and one-shot each other first. There's no incentive for people to pick Ornn, Sejuani, Yasuo, Jinx, Nautilus. Like, I've named Yasuo in this comp. Everyone hates Yasuo, but even with that, if this comp fought each other, the fights with the second comp are honestly going to be 5 times longer naturally due to the champs involved, and so much more fun, as a longer team fight means so much more can happen. More dodges, more abilities, more outplays, more auto attacks, more skill expression. And for me, late game fights are the best part of League. The first comp just one-shots each other in 3 seconds and it's over. For a 45-minute game, that's a pretty unsatisfying end in my opinion. The game deserves more than that, and you deserve more than that for 45 minutes of your time. This is super simple. I just wanted to go through these tank items and show you that for some reason, what have they added to pretty much every tank item? I'll give you one guess. Correct. More damage. This really adds up, as tanks have good base damage anyway. Like, surely there has to be a better passive available for tanks other than damage. Most tanks have good base damage anyway, and on top of this, it's very common for champs like a Mumu Udyr to build Liandry's for massive damage, then go full armor. That's short and sweet. I really don't know what more needs to be said on this. Like, we've added a damage passive to every single tank item, and we wonder where the creep's coming from. Buffs and nerfs are way too damage focused. Weak champ, buff damage. Strong champ, nerf damage. And this does the job to their win rate, but it's so unhealthy for the game long term. They don't look at the champion's kit and go, oh, they can CC you for 5 seconds. Is this a problem? No, too much damage. Let's nerf damage instead. Let's have a look at some example champs. We'll start with Malphite. 13.8, attack base damage reduced. 13.4, attack armor ratio increase. These are damaging abilities, by the way, these two. 12.23, base damage increased. 12.19. AP ratios increased on 2 abilities. 11.12. Cleave base damage increased. Cleave armor ratio increased, which is a damaging ability. So from 11.12 to 13.4, the cleave armor damage ratio doubled. And we wonder why tanks deal so much damage. In 2 seasons, Malphite has received 5 damage patches. They're not all buffs, they're buffs and nerfs. But if a tank is getting 5 damage patches, surely there's something better to balance him around, like HP, MR, cooldowns. Let's have a look at Cho'Gath. 14.6 base damage increased. 13.4 base damage increase. Like, they've also buffed armor and mana costs. Can we not just buff them slightly more or do a different buff other than being like, we've buffed armor, we've buffed mana, we've just got buff damage as well? Like, what are we doing? 12.23 base damage increases. In 1.5 seasons, Cho'Gath got 3 damage buffs, while tank items all now do more damage. I'm not saying Cho'Gath didn't need the buffs. I'm not saying he's broken. I'm saying this is where damage creep comes from. This buff overall has so little impact on the game overall. But you imagine this now, for every single champ in the game is getting a 20 plus damage increase on every ability. It really starts to add up, and that's a major issue on why damage is so crazy right now. It's added so slowly you don't notice until it's too late. Like these buffs are over a year or two. A patch I really liked, for example, is Darius. Love him or loathe him, I think he's a bit of an arsehole, but he's having a sustain issue. Should we buff damage? No. We're actually going to look at the problem and say, let's reduce mana costs and increase his healing from his Q, which is dodgeable, has counterplay, adds a bit of a mini game into the lane, and this buff increases his mana and health sustain in lane, which solves the problem without adding damage. They buffed him without adding damage in a satisfying way. He was struggling being outscaled versus tanks. Even when he beat them in lane, they would just build armor and beat him. So do we add more damage to him? Yes and no. What we do here is we increase his armor pen, because his problem is versus tanks. He doesn't need to kill the Yasuo faster. He doesn't need to kill the Fiora faster. He doesn't need to kill the Jinx faster. So he's got a nice damage buff, but it's versus only the class he needs to. This is a much better patch than what they normally do, which is like, Darius's win rate's low, let's give his Q 20 more damage and his W 20 more damage. So now every champ in the game does more damage, every champ in the game takes more damage, and he's still going to suck versus tanks because he hasn't got the armor pen for it. This is how patches should be. Look at a problem, try and solve the problem, don't just be have more damage. Champions do everything, runes are too influential. Runes working as intended, I would say, is as an ADC, you can take fleet footwork versus a poke lane to give yourself an easier lane phase, or you can take lethal tempo versus a melee or to scale better and do more late game damage. The same core playstyle is there, you just slightly adapt to the game and the comp you're against for better early or better late. So runes aid the champ identity. But runes unfortunately do quite a bit more than this. Poppy is a tank, and she's best played now as an assassin. We've got the numbers here to back it up, and you simply can't balance a champ to be a tank and an assassin at the same time. Top lane, she's strong, 53% win rate naturally because she's used to counterpick dash champs. She's kind of balanced there, and it's always good to add a tank in the game. That's one less damage dealing role, and that makes the game less bursty. It's good. But her best role sits at a 55.69% win rate and is, drumroll, Hail of Blades support. Purely because she can take Hail of Blades, the support item gives Sheen effect damage and increases damage taken. She then builds full tank and proceeds to just do major burst damage. Runes and items add so much power in the game that even tanks can be played as assassins and are actually better off being played as a full damage role. It's quite sad really that someone playing selflessly and tanking for the team would actually be better off just playing for themselves even as a support and just killing the ADC as quickly as possible. And again, going back to, oh, imagine getting hit by a Poppy as an ADC. This isn't a low elo skill issue. Mickey X is currently being a terror at MSI against the best players in the world. I'd love a diamond ADC main to tell Jackie Love, it's a skill issue, buddy, get good. With tanks being able to assassinate carries just by taking Hail of Blades and a support item, having 0 gold as they're still a support, and keeping all the benefits of being a tank, what's the point of playing an assassin in the game, I hear you say? Well, if we've learned anything from League, if there's a problem, what's the solution? More damage. But this damage is versus classes meant to counter assassins. Let me introduce you to Sirauja's Grudge. That removes percentage armor, and Crypt Bloom, which when magic resist pen wasn't enough, let's now give CDR and healing on top of it. An assassin can now take a percentage resistance reducing item and start doing massive damage to tanks and bruisers. allowing snowball champs to also scale incredibly well, on top of being able to one-shot squishies and run the early game. Akali, for example, is great into many bruises. I feel a class that should counter assassins. There's no class identity anymore, every champ does everything. They've just added so many items to cover every champion type's weakness and increase damage into the game. Like, think about this, for you guys, have a think, what is an assassin for you in a game? For me, they should snowball early, they can take over the game with a lead, but they drop off late and their kind of sole role is to one-shot the squishies. Now assassins have no identity. Zed, not long ago, was building Ravenous Hydra, taking the Inspiration rune, and just scaling into the late game to be a massive teamfight carry. Literally the complete opposite of what an assassin's meant to do, complete opposite of what Zed kit's for, and it's just through runes and items he can just completely change. You're literally playing the items and runes, not the champ anymore. This is like the RuneScape combat triangle. Melee beats range, range beats mage, mage beats melee. Remove the triangle, the game breaks. Much like League, assassin beats ADC, ADC beats tank, tank beats assassin. Well, in League, the combat triangle is completely broken. It doesn't work anymore. Everyone beats everyone. Akali, an assassin, she should lose the tank, beats Cassandra, beats Ornn, beats Cho'Gath. Like, I can't fathom how she has the damage to get through an Ornn and a Cho'Gath. This isn't just a damage problem, by the way. For me, this just makes the game so much worse, as every champ kind of does everything because of items and runes. It's no longer the assassin kills the ADC, now everyone can kill the ADC, the jungle can, the support can even one-shot them. And then it's like, okay, we need to protect the ADC to kill the tank. No, you don't. Everyone can kill the tank now. It's crazy. Look at MSI. Tanks are being picked and Varus Kalista are perma-picks. They're playing lethality into Nautilus, Cassandra, Sejuani. And because everyone is doing so much damage, you don't even need a traditional ADC. In pro play to carry late game fights, something that's been a staple of pro play for literally 14 years. This is the first year I've seen pure lethality versus lethality picks in ADC, including Senna, who just supports a Nautilus Ornn. Like, that's how much damage there is in the game. You don't even need your hyper carry to kill an Ornn, a Nautilus, and Sejuani. Everyone does everything. Leading on from ADC's damage no longer being needed, as every role does that role. What has Riot done in patch 14.10? Added more damage to ADCs, especially late game, which is an important thing to note for my next point. Like, personally, I would say this is why ADCs feel bad, not lack of damage. What does Riot do? Zero of these issues addressed, let's just buff damage. It was the same for mages. Mages not satisfying, let's just add 20 AP to every single item and address no issues. ADC's problem is lack of agency, supports dictate your lane, and whether they peel you in teamfights, and game length. This isn't talked about enough. For an ADC, I think one of the main problems they face is the game length is shorter now and they're so item dependent. Games that last on average between 25 to 30 minutes, and common community sentiment is just farm. Go late. Jinx is the best ADC in the game currently and finishes her 5th item on average at 34 minutes. The game on average goes longer than 35 minutes, less than 10% of the time. So 1 in 10 games you'll be full build. And then so many things have to align for you to be able to carry a team fight. Like, a teammate can't get caught in a jungle, you need a front to back team fight, you need to make sure you're getting peeled, you need to make sure you're not getting flanked. And what do they do to solve these issues? They don't, they just add more damage. I think if you're this deep in, I've earned a subscription or an angry hate comment disagreeing with me, I'm actually happy with either. I've had some really good chats in the comments with you guys, and I think we kind of find a middle ground of I'm like, yeah, I think I'm wrong on this and I think you're right on this, and vice versa. So all for it, go for it. So what would my solution be? Simply nerf damage. Nerf damage. 14.10's buffed ADCs and some mage items. So what's the solution? Simple. Nerf damage. 14.10 buffed ADCs and some mage items. Yasuo, Yone, Zed, Katarina, Asol, a list of others. Have a look at them on win rates. They are struggling at the minute because they can't abuse the broken items. They will receive damage buffs. The other items won't get nerfed. The other broken champs won't get nerfed. The weaker champs will get buffed to meet this level. And this is just a vicious cycle of the power creep, and it can only be stopped by reducing damage. The game would be so much better with just across the board a flat 20% damage reduction. And also I'd like to see some actual good defensive items. There's no good defensive items for ADC. Top lane defensive items are so much weaker than they were before, but there we go. I think we've got more chance of NA winning an international event than that happening.